Thanks so much for joining us here on Atlanta News First Plus. I'm Joy Lim-Nakrin. I want to let you know that at any moment now, we are awaiting a press conference from the family and attorneys of two former college students who were tased during the 2020 George Floyd protests. And this comes after a $2 million settlement was approved in this case. So just to kind of give you a little bit of background here, and you may remember that we reported to you earlier this month about the settlement. And I apologize, this is disturbing video, so I just want to warn you about this. But the Atlanta City Council did approve earlier this month a multi-million-dollar settlement, $2 million settlement for these two, at the time, college students. And they were tased by police during a 2020 arrest. And the council approved this $2 million for Taniyah, Pilgrim, and Messiah Young, who were both arrested on May 30th of 2020 for a curfew violation. The curfew was in place following protests over George Floyd's death in Minneapolis. And after the incident, attorneys for Pilgrim and Young had claimed that the police officers stormed their car, smashed their car windows, physically assaulted them. It was all caught on camera, and it went viral on social media, you may recall. The charges against the officers involved were eventually dismissed. Well, the Cherokee Judicial Circuit District Attorney ruled the evidence in the case, which was investigated by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, showed that the officers' use of force, including the use of the taser, was because of Young and Pilgrim's refusal to obey their commands. The two officers fired after the incident were previously reinstated to the Atlanta Police Department. Pilgrim was a student at Spelman College. Young went to Morehouse College at the time of the incident. And, obviously a lot of outrage over this. And we are expecting to hear, again, from let me show you a live look here, where this press conference is about to begin. We're expecting to hear from the attorneys and the families of Messiah Young and Taniyah Pilgrim. This press conference being held at the Southern Center for Human Rights in Atlanta. They're going to talk about the city's resolution for their civil rights lawsuit, which again was on Monday, July 1st. And the attorney for Messiah Young, named Harold Spence, has stated, quote, "This well-deserved settlement is a testament to the perseverance of two young people who continue to battle through the life-altering trauma of being unjustifiably brutalized by APD officers who have yet to be held criminally accountable for their misconduct." And the attorney for Messiah Young said in a statement, "The resolution of the civil case will allow these young people and their families to continue healing from this traumatic experience. It is important for them to help the community to remember that the fight to prevent police brutality continues." And another attorney for Taniyah Pilgrim saying, quote, "We applaud the city of Atlanta for bringing this case to an end after years of litigation. This traumatic incident," again, this was in 2020, "has left a permanent mental and emotional scar on both of these young adults. This case has been a roller coaster of emotions for two innocent college students who were the victims of unjustifiable excessive force by officers of the APD. We pray this act is a sign of change, that the city will continue to step forward and do the right thing in civil rights cases." And again, during this incident, the pair were tased. They were forcibly removed from their vehicles and arrested by Atlanta police officers. And it was May of 2020 as the city faced protests over George Floyd's death. These students were driving in the city at the time of the protest. They actually were not involved directly in the protests, but they've been fighting for what they consider justice over 4 years now. And so we are expecting that press conference to begin at any moment. We're going to bring you there live as soon as it does begin. In the meantime, I want to cover a little bit of other news that we are following as well today. So a tragic story I got to report to you. 2 teenagers have died, one 12-year-old hurt after an overnight shooting in Southwest Atlanta. Atlanta News First Don Shipman is at Grady Memorial Hospital in the First Alert Breaking News Tracker with what we know.
A young boy killed on his 14th birthday, and another teen, a 13-year-old killed, and a 12-year-old here at Grady Memorial Hospital expected to be okay. Family telling me that the boys were hanging out on their front stoop when someone walked up and all of a sudden started shooting at them. And you can see here at the scene, police there during the overnight hours. This right here is the 1000 block of Sparks Street. This is just off of Lee Street and Peoples Street in southwest Atlanta. Atlanta police saying that when they got there, they found the 3 kids suffering from gunshot wounds in the stairwell of that building. One of them dead right there at the scene. Detectives spending hours collecting evidence as well as interviewing witnesses, talking with family. A lot of family gathering at the scene, very upset, including one of the young boy's little cousins. Her mother said it was okay for her to tell us a little bit about her cousin on camera.
Love to ride bikes and be outside. Bike riders be outside, ride bikes all around the neighborhood and stuff like that.
In Atlanta, police say that they're looking through surveillance footage in that area in hopes of finding out and figuring out what led up to this deadly shooting. At this point, no motive, no suspects in custody. We're at Grady Memorial Hospital. Don Shipman, Atlanta News First.
Thanks so much to Don for that report. Also, for covering this story of a North Atlanta community in shock, and they're grieving the loss of this beloved family killed in a small plane crash. The Van Epps were tragically killed as they were making their way back to Georgia after a baseball tournament in New York State. Investigators say their plane crashed in a rural part of that state. Atlanta News First, Bridget Spencer reports.
A small memorial sits outside the Van Epps household in Alpharetta, their lives tragically taken in a weekend plane crash.
They were the kindest family and the sweetest people.
The family was on their way back to Georgia from Cooperstown for a baseball tournament. Investigators say their single-engine plane crashed in a rural part of the New York State. On board was 43-year-old Laura Van Epps, 42-year-old Ryan Van Epps, and their children, 12-year-old James and 10-year-old Harrison. Also not pictured, 76-year-old Roger Beggs.
We'd always say hi to the boys. They would come over sometimes. They were so into baseball and really every sport, football too.
Online tributes and prayers continue to pour in. The Milton Eagles football program sharing their pain after losing James Van Epps. And even state officials extending their condolences. Governor Brian Kemp saying, quote, "As we learn of this tragic news, please join Marty, the girls, and me in praying for the loved ones of the Beggs and Van Epps families." The family released a statement to Atlanta News First saying, quote, "As we grapple with this unimaginable loss, let us come together to remember and celebrate the beautiful lives they lived. Their kindness, laughter, and love will forever be etched in our hearts." Bridget Spencer, Atlanta News First.
And thanks so much to Bridget for that report. We're going to keep following the latest there. Okay, looking back at this video, this disturbing video, I want to let you know that we are waiting a press conference to begin at any moment now. So that's Taniyah Pilgrim and Messiah Young, who you see inside the car in this disturbing video that you're looking at. And remember, we reported to you earlier this month that a $2 million settlement had been approved by the city of Atlanta for these former college students who were tased and they were arrested during the 2020 George Floyd protests here in Atlanta. Apparently, we're driving through the city when this happened. Pilgrim was a Spelman College student. Young was a Morehouse College student at the time of this incident. And attorneys for these young people who you see here had claimed that the police officers stormed their car, smashed their car windows, physically assaulted them. It was caught on camera, as you see, and this video went viral on social media. Charges against the officers involved were dismissed. The Cherokee Judicial Circuit District Attorney ruled the evidence in the case, which was investigated by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, showed that the officers' use of force, including the use of a taser, was because of Young and Pilgrim's refusal to obey their commands. The 2 officers fired after the incident were previously reinstated to the Atlanta Police Department. And I want to show you here live as we await this press conference beginning at any moment now. You see all the media microphones being set up there. That is at the Southern Center for Human Rights in Atlanta. And this press conference is expected to begin at any moment now, where we will hear from the family and the attorneys for Messiah Young and Taniyah Pilgrim, talking about this civil rights lawsuit and the settlement. In the meantime, I want to give you a look at your forecast. Here's First Alert meteorologist Courtney Jacobazzi. Yeah, yesterday's high was very hot.
Very, very hot. Yes, 97 degrees. So needless to say, today, 87 degrees is going to feel a whole lot nicer, everyone. Overall, we're looking at a cooler day. We started mostly cloudy. We'll see decreasing clouds through the day, but a nice easterly breeze will help mix the air. And when you get a breeze, it just doesn't allow temperatures to soar quite as quickly. Our wind direction also coming out of the east-northeast, so that's pulling in some slightly cooler and slightly drier air. Overall, a much more pleasant day than what we were experiencing yesterday. So again, today's high temperature will be 87 degrees, and temperatures currently still in the 70s. So temperatures really have been hovering in the mid 70s for a few hours. And as we go through the day today, temperatures again only heading into the mid 80s as we head towards 3 o'clock. So if you have any plans this afternoon, the kids going to summer camp today, they won't need to worry about the extreme heat. If you want to head to the park, the slides won't be scorching hot. If you're headed to the Braves game tonight, we also have a Braves game at Truist Park, first pitch at 7:20. It's going to be a great night. You reserve a seat at a Braves game in July and you're usually turning into a puddle. That won't be the case today, thankfully. So overall, not a half bad night ahead of us. It does look like, I'm going to take you quickly to the 7-day forecast because it does look like someone is coming up to that podium. Just want to give you a quick view of the July 4th forecast. Mostly dry and hot, so our relief from the heat will be very brief. We'll go back into the 90s tomorrow with that humidity ramping back up, and then 4th of July looks mostly dry with a few spotty afternoon showers, highs in the low 90s, and then we'll increase rain chances as we make our way through the weekend. We're going to take you back out live to that press conference as it looks like people are coming up to speak. Let's tune in.
In what has become a sacred space, the Southern Center for Human Rights, a place where rights for those who have often been forgotten by societies and communities are remembered in this space. And so we're wanted to come here. The Southern Center for Human Rights is because this, what we are addressing today, has been a human rights issue, a civil rights issue, and what better place to come than this space where this work is done day after day. And I'd like to bring forward, to welcome us into this space and to give us some context, is Movement Counsel for the Southern Center for Human Rights, Attorney Devin Franklin. Devin.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Devin Franklin. I am Movement Policy Counsel here at the Southern Center for Human Rights. And I am grateful to be in this space and to welcome Messiah Young and his family, and Taniyah Pilgrim and her family as well. For us to have a resolution to the tragic experience that they had to endure during May of 2020. What happened to Taniyah and Messiah on that date is emblematic of the culture of policing in Atlanta Police Department. I know this because it's part of my work here at the Southern Center for Human Rights. I do a great deal of work looking at policing trends in the city of Atlanta. That their assault occurred only yards away from hundreds, if not thousands, of protesters who were crying out for justice and freedom and accountability for those officers who had taken the life of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. That the tragedy that occurred to them could happen in that space, there are no words for it. There's no reason to have children pulled out of vehicles and assaulted by police officers. There's no reason for this conversation to have taken more than 4 years to resolve. There is no reason but for the fact that we understand that here in the city of Atlanta, that a premium is placed on policing as an institution that is allowed to do and proceed at their own will. To the extent that reform or policy adjustments are a thing that is considered by the police department brass or elected officials, they have betrayed those particular reforms. Shortly after the incidents that happened with Messiah and Taniyah, the Atlanta City Council, the Atlanta Police Department took measures that were said to reduce policing violence towards citizens. They adopted 8 Can't Wait. They implemented a public-facing dashboard that was supposed to be a transparency measure, the Justice Reform website, a website where the Atlanta Police Department was supposed to regularly publish data that pertained to how frequently they actually use force against citizens. That dashboard has not been updated in more than a year and a half. And so the mechanisms that they put in place to protect citizens from the harms that police are uniquely situated to impact upon people have not been followed upon by council members, the police department, or Mayor Andre Dickens. And I'm sorry. Just to give an understanding of what type of work we're talking about here with the Atlanta Police Department. Give me a second. We are dealing with a police department that is more well-funded than most police departments in the United States of America, that is more well-staffed than most police departments in the United States of America, that if you go to this Justice Reform Policy website, they tell you their officers are more trained than most in the country. Yet we have some of the greatest racial disparities in the use of force in the United States of America. We have some of the lowest rates of accountability for officers who inflict use of force against those persons arrested. And so today is a step towards accountability. We are grateful that Messiah and Taniyah will receive some level of recompense, but understand that the memories of what happened to them that day can never be erased. They live with that incident etched in their memories forever. They are forever impacted. We think about the things that we can do going forward to make sure that these things do not happen to anyone else again, especially college students who come to our city to better themselves. Here at the Southern Center of Human Rights, we seek for ways to engage with community members and citizens. We are launching a court watch program soon so that we can talk not just about the data of what happens in our courts, but so that citizens can hear officers testify or not testify about the way in which they do their work. We encourage you to reach out to us and find ways to become part of community in that way. And we thank you for your time, and we thank you for this legal team and their excellent work.
There was 2 law firms, but 1 legal team. We have been honored to work with my friends, Chris Stewart, Justin Miller, Diana Lee of the Stewart Miller Simmons law firm. These trial attorneys have been wonderful to work with because they are, like our firm, committed to justice. They have been warriors. They have been legal warriors, and it is a great honor that we've had a chance to combine forces to fight for these students, to set aside anything that might appear to be different, and to just be one legal team and to do that work. And so I know that Harold Spence, you'll hear from him in a moment. He's led our litigation team on this front. But at this time, I'd like to bring up, again, my friend and warrior in this work, Chris Stewart.
Good morning. I'm attorney Chris Stewart. I, along with my law partner Justin Miller and Diana Lee, we represented Taniyah Pilgrim. I just wanted to make sure the general public understands the actual facts of this case. We've seen a lot of things misquoted. Taniyah and Messiah were not at the protests. They did not take part in the protests. They had nothing to do with the protest that night. They were driving in their car after getting something to eat and got stuck in traffic. That's what happened. And then, as you all saw from the video, which speaks for itself, you saw a 90-pound girl ripped out of a car, tasered multiple times, slammed on the ground, handcuffed, and put in the back of a van during the height of COVID with no mask, with a bunch of people who had actually been arrested. Taniyah was never arrested. She was never charged. We have no idea why they actually tasered her, assaulted her, handcuffed her, and put her in a van. What most of you don't know is later that night, an officer just opened the back of the van, took off her handcuffs, and pushed her away. And she was left on the street, half clothed, in the middle of protests that she wasn't there for. That's why the city settled this case. This is not a gift. This is not something that these kids didn't deserve. Both of these kids were innocent victims who were caught in traffic that night and mistaken for someone who was breaking the law. The city wouldn't just pay $2 million for no reason. We've taken multiple depositions of all the officers, of chiefs, of everybody. We know what actually happened because we got to talk to the officers and ask, why did you do this to this girl? The city heard, and the case settled for $2 million. We were proud to fight for them. We fight for victims. It doesn't matter your race, creed, color, gender. We fight for victims who have been abused. These kids were abused. And we've seen people say, well, that's our taxpayer money. It is. But it's also your taxpayer money that paid a 200-pound officer to taser a little girl, rip her out her car, and handcuff her and not arrest her. That's why police officers do need insurance, which we fought for forever, but never ever happens. Because then it wouldn't be your tax dollars, it would be insurance. But that won't happen because then that would be a third-party oversight. So maybe change will happen, but don't question, did these kids deserve it? Because if this was your daughter or son who innocently was driving a car and had this happen to them, what value would you put on it? Thank you to everybody that have been supporting for all these years, and thank you to our entire legal team that fought to get this done, and the city council members and the mayor.
Thank you, Chris. We'd like to bring forward my law partner, Harold Spence, who has been our lead litigator in a lot of the depositions that Chris referred to. Harold has taken, and again, what we heard from these officers, from those that were deposed, is disturbing, deeply, deeply disturbing. That is where the focus should be, not on this final outcome. As Chris said, I completely agree. Nothing can compensate these young people for the traumatic experience that they went through, and that will be forever a part of their life, and that they will forever have to deal with as they go forward. Every time a police car pulls up, every time a police officer is in their presence, they will think twice. They will move differently. They will respond differently. They will have an emotional reaction because they know what's possible. And that is sad and sickening. To the cities of Chicago and San Antonio, the cities that they came from, to come to Atlanta, to go to the Atlanta University Center, to Morehouse and Spelman, there should be an apology issued to those cities for their young people coming here and being brutalized in that way. So with that, Attorney Harold Spence.
Good morning, everyone. Our presence here today is a testament to the courage and perseverance of these two young people Taniyah Pilgrim and Messiah Young. They were brutalized on May 30th, 2020, for no reason. One of the good things about trying cases is that you do get to take depositions of the people that you sue. We sued 10 police officers in this case, and the former chief of police, Erica Shields. So you get to take their depositions, sit them in a room, and for up to 7 hours, you can question them about the events concerning the lawsuit. Many of the depositions of the officers that we sued took 7 hours, not because we were being inefficient in taking them, but because they operated by the traditional APD playbook. They falsified their initial reports. When they went before internal affairs, they didn't tell the truth. And they came into their depositions determined not to tell the truth. But if you look at the deposition testimony of each of these 10 officers, you'll see them giving similar answers. Now, it took hours to get them there. Did Taniyah Pilgrim do anything that night to justify any degree of physical force being exerted against her? All 10 of them, no. The former chief of police, Erica Shields, no. Former Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, no. Did Taniyah Pilgrim do anything to justify being tased that night? The uniform answer was no. Did she do anything to justify being dragged from the vehicle she was in and handcuffed? The answer was no. We deposed the city's master class instructor on tasers. Did Messiah Young do anything to justify being tased that night? And this is the city's representative. The answer was no. So it's these no answers that have prompted the resolution of this case. Now, we've been told that a decision was made not to prosecute these officers, sort of suggesting that this was a gift, this settlement was a gift to these young people. But the governor chose who was going to investigate this case. And the person that he chose, he almost baked in the result. We saw yesterday with a decision from our nation's highest court that depending on who the decision makers are, the outcome could be baked in from the outset. So because of who was chosen to look into whether these officers should be prosecuted, the outcome was baked in from the outset. And if you look at the report, this 17-page report that this special prosecutor wrote, it is full of falsehoods from beginning to end. Falsehoods that were denied by the officers involved, that were denied by the former mayor, that were denied by the former chief of police. He said that everybody out there who's out there after 9 o'clock was supposed to be arrested. Nobody said that that was true. In fact, everybody denied it. The city still had a law on the books that said you have to be willfully and knowingly violating the curfew. There was zero evidence that Taniyah Pilgrim or Messiah Young willfully or knowingly violated any curfew. This special district attorney's report said that the officers were told that they should treat Messiah Young and Taniyah Pilgrim as if they were doing their darndest to tear down the city of Atlanta. I asked each of the 10 officers that. Were you told that that's how you should treat them? The answer was no. The former police chief, did you tell any officer that that's how they should treat these young people? No. The former mayor denied it. So it's right and just that we are here today. It's right and just that this matter has been resolved. I don't know how this would impact me if I had gone through what they went through when I was in my early 20s and a college student. To be surrounded by angry police officers who take out tasers and tase you for no reason, who take out guns and point them toward you, who shout conflicting commands toward you. It's a frightening and chaotic scene that these young people went through, something that has traumatized them, I suspect, for life. But notwithstanding that trauma, they've shown the kind of perseverance and courage that has gotten us here today. It's been an honor representing them, and I'd just like to say that a lot of the work that we did with Chris Stewart and Justin Miller's firm, we spent a lot of time together. I mean, weeks on end. And it was my great pleasure to work particularly closely with one of the attorneys there, Attorney Diana Lee, who is going to be a rising star in the legal profession. You may not know the name, but remember it, because she's going to be a rising star. So to Chris Stewart, Justin Miller, and Diana Lee, my law partner, Maoli Davis, and I thank you for having had this opportunity to work with you on this case. Thank you much.
At this time, we'd like to have Messiah come up and share briefly. He will not be taking any questions, but he would like to just have a chance to address everyone as this closes out. His family has been here with him throughout this process. As we spoke earlier today, we just reminded one another that out of all of this, what matters most is family. And his family has stood by him, supported him, loved him, and continue to do so. And by large part is the reason that he's able to even stand after having gone through what he went through. Messiah.
Thank you for everyone who supported us over the years. There's a lot of work to be done. There's still blood on the streets of Atlanta. The idea of justice that was once lauded has unfortunately crumbled to dust. We will keep pushing forward. Bless you, and I am the bone of my sword.
We'd like Taniyah to come up and share as well.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who has been supporting and uplifting us. This situation occurred 4 years ago, and it's a memory that I've been wanting to forget, and I'm sure Messiah has too, but unfortunately, it is etched into our memory. But yeah, I just want to say I'm happy that this is finally settled. I'm happy to close this chapter of my life, and once again, I just want to say I really appreciate everyone, especially my lawyers and my family, and yeah, thank you guys so much.
We'll take some questions. Chris, any questions? Yes.
It was decided that the officers did not use excessive force and they wouldn't be charged. I think a lot of people thought this was over, and I'm guessing that's why they're calling this a gift to the college students. But can you just speak to the contrast between they didn't use excessive force, but then the city decided 13-1 that they deserve this money?
Yeah, I would like to, and I'll let anyone else who wants to speak on it as well. And I do want to lift up that one, Alex Wan, very disappointing, you know, and I just hope that the voters remember who was the one who voted against them. I think that's important for the city and the voters to remember who would vote against this Morehouse and Spelman student who were minding their business at the time. The second piece, your question, we see too often, very rarely do we see police prosecuted. And so to think that this special appointed prosecutor who had a narrative and a report, as Attorney Spence mentioned, full of lies, of exaggerations, of falsehoods, did an investigation in the way that these lawyers who took the actual sworn depositions, it's just night and day. It's very easy when you're politically motivated to write off what happened to these young people. It's not so easy when each person has to sit in that seat, raise their hand, and under oath answer a series of questions that they could not deny. And so the legal department had an opportunity to be present and hear the results of those questions. That's different from this concocted, created narrative that this prosecutor, who has now been elevated to a Superior Court judge, was able to do and put forward. So everybody who understands how this system currently works is clear that what was presented as a report about why they could not be criminally prosecuted was nothing more than a political narrative that was necessary, again, to push back against any of the reforms that the community, and there were people in the street, and sometimes this is taken out of context. In 2020, people took to the street of all races, of all ages, and said, enough is enough. We see what's happening predominantly to black folk in America, and this has to stop. And so now there's been this swing the other way, and this report that this district attorney produced was a part of that swing in the other direction that, again, attempted to criminalize the victim, as so often is done when black, brown, and poor people are brutalized by law enforcement.
And this is what we have to deal with when we deal with these cases, right? People think it's over, the case is done because it's not in the news anymore. But clearly it's not over for them. And behind the scenes, we've been working the entire 4 years to make sure we get to this moment in time. So because everyone doesn't see all of the work that goes into getting here, they say, I think it's over. They'll see a report and they say it's done. But it's not done, and the work still has to happen, and it's 4 years later. And so people just have to remember that just because they don't see it, or they see one report, it doesn't mean that the people who are fighting us to keep justice from happening aren't doing their work as well.
As noted, 4 years have passed. What are Messiah and Taniyah doing today? What's going on right now?
Messiah is an artist, as you can see. He is an artist. He is an artist at heart. He is a creator, and we're looking forward to his creations, clothing, style, fashion, and so that's been his focus with the support of his family. So we're excited. I think it'll launch in November sometime, right? So in November, you know, when you all see me come to the next press conference, I'm going to be decked out with Messiah's gear, I think, if I can wear it. So, but that's what Messiah is doing, and Taniyah, I know, is getting ready to graduate.
Yeah. I had to take a little break from school, but now I graduate in December, so yeah, I'm really excited.
We can clap for that.
I just wanted to say in response to the last question. In this case, the city of Atlanta hired 3 private law firms to represent it. Representatives from these 3 private law firms participated in every deposition, in every phase of this case, a case in which several 100,000 pages of documents were exchanged. Part of the reason why the city settled this case was because the lawyers who were in the room, the lawyers who were litigating this case, told them, we can lose this. We should settle. It's in our best interest to settle. Now, you see these resolutions, and they say, we decided to settle because it would cost us more to defend the case than it would be worth. That's not why they did it. And it wasn't out of the goodness of their heart. They did it because they knew that they could lose. They knew that they were wrong. They won't admit it, but nobody pays $2 million as a gift to anybody.
The officers responded to your questions in a deposition, but what reason did they give for this incident?
None. They couldn't justify it. When we asked them, did Taniyah Pilgrim do anything to threaten you, to justify being taken? The answer was no, but you have to understand how these depositions work. You spend hours getting them up to this point, fighting through the lies, the resistance to acknowledging the truth, and ultimately there's nowhere else for them to go. They could provide no justification. And I just brought with me the chief of police's deposition. And I could turn to the page now and read the question and answer. Was there any legal justification for the force administered to Messiah Young and Taniyah Pilgrim? Her answer was no. under oath, that's the former chief of police. So they couldn't give a reason because no justifiable or legal reason existed for them to exert any degree of force against these two young people.
The city council issued or made some amendments to their resolution to issue this settlement. One of those amendments had to do with absolving themselves of taking any blame for this. That was one of the amendments. So what's your response to that?
I mean, that's fine. You know, that's pretty standard in a lot of settlements. But to clear up one thing that has been misunderstood, they're saying the officers were found, you know, from the resolution. They didn't do anything. They didn't violate anything. Well, that's not fully true. We have to remember they were terminated. They were prosecuted by a DA. They were charged. The police chief found that they violated multiple things, the past police chief. That's 3 representatives of Atlanta finding that these officers had done something, and just 1 special prosecutor who disagreed. So that's 3 very important high-ranking people in Atlanta who found that they did something and that this settlement would have been deserving and that multiple things were violated, and 1 person who disagreed. So it's not fully accurate that the city never thought that these officers did anything wrong, because 3 high-ranking officials did.
I'd like to know whether Taniyah and Messiah have any big plans, you know, to do anything benefiting the community, you know, with the settlement or rewards.
They're going to continue to be supportive of the social justice work that the center, when we talked to them about where this should take place, and we mentioned the Southern Center for Human Rights, they thought that this would be the appropriate place because they know that what they experienced, this work continues, and they just don't want another young person to have to go through this. And so their presence here is their support of the work of the Southern Center for Human Rights and the ongoing fight against, for police accountability and against police brutality. We thank you all for coming this morning. Again, we thank these law firms, we thank these families, but we also thank those who did take to the street, because we don't want to criminalize them because they did voice their First Amendment right to protest the death of George Floyd. And so we lift up the name of George Floyd today, and we remember what started all of this to try to make a change in America and a change in Atlanta. And so we say his name. Thank you.
So you've been listening live to the attorneys, excuse me, for Messiah Young and Taniyah Pilgrim, as well as Messiah Young and Taniyah Pilgrim themselves. And these were the 2, at the time, college students who had been tased by Atlanta police. So this comes after a $2 million settlement was awarded to these former students, one at Spelman College at the time and another at Morehouse College at the time of this incident. And it happened during the 2020 protests over George Floyd's death. And, you know, we heard attorneys address the fact that, you know, it's taxpayer dollars, it's $2 million. But if it was your child that was involved in this, don't you think that you would want some sort of justice and compensation? That was essentially the message today. And we heard that both Taniyah Pilgrim and Messiah Young, recovering from essentially PTSD, but seem to be moving on with their lives and thriving and happy to be closing this chapter. We're going to have much more on Atlanta News First and Atlanta News First Plus. You can download our free app to get the latest updates sent right to your phone.